Let us put hands on hearts. Feel the warm connection. Let love in this moment flow. Say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others. And that love will heal the world. We expand our circle of beloved community to remember the people of Sri Lanka and the Easter Sunday attacks. It suffered by terrorists. Hundreds died. It is a sobering reminder how religious faith can be twisted and distorted into an engine of destruction. We grieve with Muslims around the world how this faith was radicalized and made to serve hate rather than love. At this time, I invite you to say out loud the names of people who you are holding in your heart this morning. Let silence be our sanctuary now. We take in a big breath, and then we exhale. We gently surrender to something larger than ourselves. We enter into the wise silence. I come on Sunday feeling weary, having worn out the snooze button on my alarm clock. I come on Sunday feeling frightened, having seared my eyes reading the latest news. I come on Sunday feeling burdened, having fretted about my workday worries. but I leave Sunday service feeling refreshed, having been renewed by the spirit of love in the community that exists here. I leave Sunday service feeling whole, feeling lifted up by the words of righteous challenge. I leave Sunday service feeling energized, ready to continue our fight for peace and justice. This haven, this refuge, this place of worship and wonder exists because we make it so. With our contributions, the gifts of our time, our skills, our food, our love, our laughter, and our money. Please join me in giving so that we may continue to have a place that fortifies and challenges us in these trying and troubled times. The offering will now be given and very gratefully received. And now, please join me in the dedication of the offering, which is found in your order of service. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action we call community, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings.
Good morning. Thank you for the warm welcome at the 9 a.m. service and for this one as well. I am a politician, so I don't usually give sermons. So it might be a little bit different angle this morning, but I really appreciate everyone being here and listening with open hearts and open minds. There is more energy from 2 minutes of sunlight than it takes to power all of humanity in an entire year. There is more energy from 2 minutes of sunlight than it takes to power all of humanity in an entire year. Now, that's not to mention the energy potential of the wind and the waves and the molten core beneath our feet. The earth and the universe have provided in its very existence and life the fuel to sustain endless human ambition. And at the risk of contradicting myself as an environmentalist, to which I am to my core, I want to suspend the debate in our mind for a moment about the unsustainable model of endless economic growth. I imagine that I might have a lot of people in here who agree that our economic systems since the Industrial Revolution have brought us to the brink of a more disastrous climate. But instead, I want you to put yourself in the frame of mind of a young male person of color who doesn't believe the police are there to protect and serve him. Put yourself in the mind of an aging grandmother caring for her grandchildren because their parents are incarcerated or addicted to heroin. Living in a house built 70 years ago with a utility bill that would make an upper middle class family fret. Put yourself in the mind of a millennial with crushing college debt, or a minimum wage worker living in Atlanta today who spends almost half of their monthly income on housing expenses. Today, I want to bring into this space my reflections on environmental justice and what it means to the success of our broader movement to stop climate change and reverse global warming. First, environmental justice. Environmental justice is the link between the environment and social justice. It is to resolve the disproportionate distribution of environmental risk, which includes negative health, social, and economic effects on our communities. The Sierra Club, where I serve as Georgia's chapter director, is centering our key principles of equity, justice, and inclusion in every aspect of our work. We aim to transform ourselves and build healthy, welcoming, and sustainable communities that celebrate people from all walks of life. Maybe you are in agreement with that statement. It might not surprise you that this notion is somewhat controversial in other aspects of the environmental movement. One person told me that the Sierra Club is mission creeping. Focus on the animals and the trees and the rivers, and quit talking about Black Lives Mattering or support for immigrant communities. The same vein of this argument was given over a decade ago when the Sierra Club, as a national board of directors, made the climate change urgency their top priority, the top priority of a 125-year-old organization. People said, focus on taking people outside. Let's go for hikes. Let's protect our coasts and our forests. That is what the Sierra Club does, they said. But we would say if the earth heats up too much, or if it gets too cold, too wet, or too dry, if rising sea levels and king tides wash away parts of Cumberland Island, or if forest fires destroy the Chattahoochee National Forest, what good were our conservation efforts if the climate wiped them all out? And so we began to think of a fundamental retooling of our environmental movement. It began by doubling down on environmental justice principles, and as a natural evolution in broadening our vernacular, climate justice also has become interwoven into this message. We realized, and actually realized in the last few years, it's taken a while to learn this, but growing the climate justice movement and environmental justice movement means bringing more people into the movement. We need people from all walks of life to enlist humanity, as the Sierra Club mission statement reads, not just some of humanity, but all of humanity. And so when we began to show up in communities where, quite frankly, the mostly white Sierra Club had never been before, the idea of saving the planet was welcomed, but it wasn't the most pressing problem of our fellow Americans. They were facing income inequality, rising utility bills, police shootings, gentrification, displacement in the name of progress, dirty air and water in communities without affordable health care coverage or even a doctor within reach of a rural area. There's a lot of Americans who are struggling, and if we want them to join our movement, we have to join their movement, and their movements, plural. So out of this mindset arose a fundamental stance on the movement to a clean energy economy, for example. And that is that the communities who have been impacted the most by pollution, climate change, environmental injustices should be the first to receive the investments in our transition to a more sustainable society. And that means, for example, when Atlanta, as they've passed their plan for 100% clean energy, and Clarkston is working on this as well, that the zip codes with the highest energy burden should be the first to receive the energy efficient investments, helping people save money on their utility bills. It sounds very simple. Now, ultimately, the energy efficiency investments would spread to all of our society and our economy, rich and poor alike, because getting to 100% clean energy actually means using 50% less energy. You got to meet there in the middle. The Green New Deal, for example, has been ridiculed for being too expensive, even though it's just a set of principles. All right, there actually is no plan for the Green New Deal. It's a set of principles. However, for example, the Green New Deal could, as one study put, invest $800 billion in energy efficiency across residential, commercial, and the industrial sectors, which would save $1.3 trillion, creating millions of higher-paying, skilled trade jobs which would have to last over a generation for 25 years or more, because it's a lot of work that we have to catch up on. Now, climate justice means that there are people in the world today who have been displaced because of rising sea levels. People who literally have lost their homes in parts of the Pacific islands because of rising sea level. But under international law and U.S. immigration law, these people have no protections for seeking asylum or refugee status. The United Nations estimates that over 140 million people could be displaced because of climate disruptions by 2050. And if you thought 10,000 migrants in a caravan freaked people out, what would happen if there was 100,000 or 1 million people on our continent that were displaced? Clarkston has been receiving refugees for a time period from Syria. 5 million Syrians fled Syria between the dates of 2012 to 2016 and began to make a journey into Europe. People in Bangladesh are absorbing over 1 million Rohingya Muslim Burmese from displacement from ethnic violence, but are now being threatened with flooding and landslides because the place that they're at is in an environmentally precarious position, and they're at risk. We must be proactive in our solutions to prevent these crises. We must be willing to acknowledge that some will need to be rescued and resettled. And let's be clear that these disruptions aren't just happening in Bangladesh or in the Pacific Ocean. They're happening in Louisiana. They're happening in parts of South Georgia. Bigger tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding events are displacing Americans. We had an intern who worked with us last summer at the Sierra Club office, and she shared a story in a letter to our larger Sierra Club membership about her experience working directly with refugees on the island of Lesbos that I want to share with you today. Dear friends, I had the opportunity to spend a few months working with an NGO on Lesbos last fall, and I witnessed firsthand the disparate ways that government officials choose to treat refugees. Over the last few years, Lesbos, Greece has become a hotspot for refugees. Only 4.1 miles separate its shores from Turkey, which has led to hundreds of thousands of people to make the dangerous journey across the sea as they seek asylum in Europe. Images of frightened families crammed into small rubber boats took the media by storm in 2015. And though their stories have mostly disappeared from the headlines, the situation still remains today. On Lesbos, there are two main camps, Moria and Karatepe. Moria is located in an old prison, and those who live there say it still feels like one today. There's capacity for 1,800, but currently 6,000 live there. There's no education provided for the thousands of children who play in dangerous and unsanitary spaces. I watched as children would slide down a hill on trash bags for fun, sit with blank faces inside their tents, and wait in line for hours alongside parents for their next small meal. There is extremely limited health care. Residents are stuck in limbo as they wait their asylum, a process that can take anywhere from 1 month to over 2 years. Individuals have been stripped of nearly all autonomy over their own lives. Now, as a response to this abuse of human rights occurring in Moria, the municipality of Lesbos created Karatepe. Karatepe's residents fondly refer to the camp as a village. And the goal of this village is to reinstill dignity and to empower all who live there. A team of refugees volunteer daily with NGOs to deliver food to each home, run children's activities, and coordinate community kitchens. Even the terminology where resident is used in place of refugee helps to restore a sense of humanity. Every person I met in this camp shares an astonishing resilience and desire to begin a new, meaningful life. However, despite these improved conditions in Karatepe, the legal status and therefore the future of these refugees is still up in the air. So what has been done to empower more displaced people and ensure that they receive sufficient protection under international law? In 1951, the majority of UN member states passed the Refugee Convention, creating the legal definition of a refugee. However, this definition does not include victims of climate change. And with over 140 million people potentially being displaced by climate change, this troubling discrepancy is cause for serious concern as the number of human-caused natural disasters continues to increase at exponential rates. And as I read about the strong anti-immigrant rhetoric surrounding the family separations happening at our own borders, I can't help but think of all the incredibly resilient and kind people I met on the island of Lesbos. My experiences have taught me that both government officials and individuals have the power and agency and the responsibility to support these vulnerable populations. In addition to adding climate change as a legitimate reason for seeking asylum, we need to do more to create a future in which less people are being forced to flee their homes. As I read that letter, I was thinking about, what is it that I'm doing? I'm a government official, but I'm also an advocate. And I was reminded of the years, I was having this vision and memory of years of myself marching and protesting and thinking about all the times that I marched. And I had this vision about a world where peace ruled supreme and bigotry, racism, fascism, and narrow-mindedness went away. And I began to think about the people in the marches that I've been involved in and the movements I've been involved in, each sort of taking their own path, but ultimately reaching the same destination. And as a people interconnected through climate, culture, character of heart, within this movement and within a broader movement, I saw this movement full of kindred spirits. I saw a vibrant network of leaders who were rising up to embrace the unknown and an increasingly uncertain future. See, I believe that we're all leaders, And if we all believe that to create change, we must have courage, love, and innovation as fundamental principles, and if we refuse to accept incremental change in a world with rapidly accelerating climate disruptions, injustices perpetrated by those sworn to protect us, perverse income inequality, the scale and nature of our challenges are exponential. And these incremental strategies simply cannot keep pace. We must seek justice in all forms if our movement is to be successful. And so I want to share with you a few principles of how the Sierra Club and how I myself view our movement in context of all these larger movements, and how we're hopefully going to create this change, how we're going to generate exponential change. Number one, we have to lead with an audacious vision and a bold purpose. We must be guided by a vision and a purpose audacious and bold enough to unite a diverse movement that's building a world that we actually need. Now, we're not blindly yearning for the impossible or the utopic in our thinking, nor are we nostalgic or hearkening back to a greater time that never existed. The leaders we want imagine a path forward to possible futures that we cannot yet see. We must lead others to share in this vision in their own way. Our dreams are rooted in the wisdom of the past, with awareness of the present and hopes for the future. Number two, deep embodiment. This is the be the change you see in the world bumper sticker. Believing another world is possible is different than practicing another world in our daily lives. We must step into the future on a daily basis. Injustices can be eliminated on a daily basis simply by how we choose to recognize them and lead by example, and shifting into new forms of culture and new modes of relating to ourselves and each other. These practices emphasize mutual interdependence and care between individuals and groups, communities, and the planet. And beyond working against injustice, our movement builders and our leaders are working for liberation. And we must do this by developing creative, innovative practices of liberation from the micro to the macro levels. We must commit to cultivating new ways of being defined by joy, humor, and humility. And we must step into the fullness of our responsibility to ourselves and each other with love. We must recognize that the secret is to be the future now. Radical connection and community, number three. Our leaders understand that in politics and in life and in movements, everything gets done through relationships and nothing gets done without them. Everything gets done with relationships and nothing gets done without them. Such as in nature, our political ecosystems rely on interdependence and interconnectedness. Our leaders know that our movement is about people and cultures and our relationship to bring to each other and to our planet. We have to make our tent larger and bring our goals into alignment. And this is not about making others fall in line or replacing one vision with another. It's about co-creating a story of the future and inviting others to engage in advancing it. You know, too often I think in the environmental movement, I've noticed that we would try to go to a community where there's a coal plant. And our goal for years was, we got to shut down this coal plant. And then once that coal plant was shut down, we'd move on to the next coal plant. That was the goal. And then we started saying, well, what about the people that live in those communities? What happens to the tax base of that Board of Education that was receiving millions of dollars in revenues, funding their schools because of that coal plant? Now that it's gone, that money has disappeared and those jobs have disappeared. And so as we began to practice this radical connection to community, we discovered that people weren't necessarily holding on. They didn't like necessarily love coal. They loved the fact that it was part of their community. And seeing something be wiped out without any just transition planning in mind, to them left a huge gaping hole, not just in their physical community, but in everything that they had known. And so we have more recently begun to figure out what is that just transition what does it look like? And a lot of it has to do with this transition to a clean energy economy. Instead of having a coal plant that's spewing dirty air and there's coal ash ponds that could be polluting the nearby water source, let's have solar farms. Let's have energy efficiency training programs. Let's have cleanup investments. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the community began to say, you know what, maybe coal's day has come and we need to start embracing the future. It's happening right now, actually, at the Public Service Commission. Georgia Power is considering shutting down coal plants in Rome, Georgia, and near Savannah, Plant Hammond and Plant McIntosh. And we are advocating right now for a just transition for those communities. Number 4, strategic navigation. With this audacious vision, deep embodiment, and radical connection, our leaders can strategically adapt to navigate rapidly changing environments. Strategic navigation requires new forms of leadership that transcend traditional modes of domination hierarchy. And whatever leadership position that we hold, and we're all leaders, we lead for the whole. We bring people together with a bigger purpose in mind. We want to foster collaborative action that is nonlinear, synergistic, and highly networked. We have to find multiple paths that are strategically differentiated, but are all headed to that same mountaintop. We have to align different strategies that leverage each of our strengths into one unified goal. Our environmental movement can make big leaps towards a new society, even as they dismantle the old systems that no longer serve us. And from a position of collective power, these skills will guide us towards an emergent future. Lastly, is practicing the future now, number 5. Our movement connects us with ourselves, with each other and the whole of our communities, and with the whole of humanity. This changes us deep within in more ways than we could ever imagine. It will change the way we think, change the way we live, our structures and our systems, and even who we are. Through the practices of leading with vision, with deep embodiment, with radical connection and strategic navigation, we can transform ourselves. And by doing so, our movements, our strategies, our relationships, and our world. We can identify the unconscious habits and patterns of behavior that limit our current community's ability to recognize our full power and potential. Together, we can transition from a world where the few live at the expense of the many to a world where the many govern for the benefit of all. And as many of these movements are saying, to change everything, we need everyone. In closing, I think it's important to reflect on the blessings to which each and every one of us have received during our lives. The blessings of living in a moment in our nation's history where people from sea to shining sea are uniting in defense of decency and democracy. The blessings of healthcare for millions more of our fellow citizens and how far we have come in just a decade. Blessings to be alive on this planet, a speck in the dark, cold vastness of space with a shining sun, a cool breeze, abundant water and waves, and all of the natural resources we would ever need right now without having to pillage below the ground. So many blessings to which each of you have your own personal ones to praise, and a reminder of the infinite power that is unnameable and possibly unknowable in this lifetime, that exists interwoven from the stars down to the cells in our body and souls of all creatures here below. And we should all leave here today with a blessing given and blessing received, and to praise the source of life each and every day. Thank you.
Our final hymn is number 207, Earth Was Given as a Garden. We'll sing all three verses. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Let us join hands for the benediction. Oh, thank you, Tracy. As a people interconnected through climate, culture, character of heart, may you find the strength to be a leader with the optimism and energy to create change. May you have courage, love, and innovation to guide you. Raise your voice for honesty, truth, and compassion against injustice, lying, and greed. Together, we will change the earth. Amen.
Well, I got bunches of these, man. Maybe you played as much tennis as I played.